Yep.
So I was delighted to be able to come and speak to you about what the Landscape Committee does. I've been on the committee only since last May, but I've learned an enormous amount about how important it is to our community. I have a bunch of slides up here on a PowerPoint presentation. I'm giving that to Cheryl and Arlene as they need, if they want copies of it, and anybody else can get copies of it. And Buddy will have a copy of it for his video as well. So that'll all be available to you. And I do have one big map up here if you're interested in seeing details afterwards. Don't hesitate to ask questions. I'm not too bashful up in front of people, so I'd be happy to answer questions as we go. And I'll take whatever time it takes, and you all set the pace for me. So my name is Karl Krummel. I'm the chair right now of the Landscape Committee. And Beth and I moved into Hooper Place in October of 2014, so we've been here a while. I was a research and development vice president for a little company you may have heard of, L'Oreal. And so my background is more consumer goods and beauty care products. But we also ran a 10-bedroom bed and breakfast in northwest New Jersey on 10 acres. And that's really where I cut my teeth on a lot of landscaping because it was 5-star rated, so we had to keep the place looking nice. Beth and I owned it and ran it for about 9 years. My background, I'm a chemical engineer with an MBA. And you can see I was involved with the theater club, but then with my coworkers in one of my chemistry projects over there in the lower right, we went to a couple meetings together. So, you know, I've worked with some interesting people. What the Carolina Arbors Landscape Committee does is we manage about 12.5 to 15 million square feet of turf, between the turf that our houses sit on, our streets, and then all the green stuff that we have to take care of. So it's a pretty good sized job. We spend about 40% of your HOA dues. And so our job is to make sure it's spent wisely. I mean, we don't actually spend it, but we monitor the people who do. We have the stormwater control measures. They used to be called BMPs that we manage. We have, I think, 5 different contractors that we work with to do this work for the community. Here's the budget. You can see we're going to spend in 2022 about $1.3 million out of the total HOA budget. So that's about 40% of the total budget. It's spread across all kinds of things. I mean, people think about, oh, I want mulch in my yard. Well, that's $170,000 to do mulch for 1,292 homes. To just give you, or the number that haven't opted out, that is. And so what we do is we monitor and recommend property maintenance companies. We evaluate their performance. You know, are they cutting your grass right? Are they pruning as they're supposed to, applying the mulch and the fertilizer as needed? The Landscape Committee, though, does not overlook landscaping on residential property. That's really the ARC, the Architectural Review Committee. We got involved with street trees this year because we knew the arborist in the area and were able to get a good price for everybody. But street trees really fall under the ARC, not the Landscape Committee. So that's just a nuance there. I'm kind of happy because it's been a bit controversial. But I'll explain to you why these street trees are important. We manage all the common areas. You'll see on this map up here, and I'll show you a picture of it in a minute, all the yellow areas marked are what we call common areas. They're areas that we maintain for the community. We cut the grass, we prune the trees and all, and they're for all of our enjoyment, but they're not individual homeowner properties. And we don't permit things like hardscaping, you know, no benches or statuary or rings of metal around trees and all. That's not permitted in the common areas. We keep them as close to nature as possible. The natural areas, though, are those green places with the trees, and we don't do anything in those. Those are totally protected. Don't take trees out. Don't, if a tree goes down, it stays where it falls, unless there's exceptional circumstances. We manage the Piedmont Hall grounds. the landscape lighting, the dog parks, the playground. So basically, we have everything except the residential property that we overlook. And then on residential property, we take a look at what people like Yardneek or Edge Environmental or Brightview or Greenscape, all of these contractors do for us. Now this is our Landscape Committee page. And what you'll see on here is I've got a number of documents already on here. I'll put this presentation on here as well. But we have things like the North Carolina Forest Ranger report that we commissioned last year. We'll talk more about that. But you'll see the new page, we have a new list of members because we've added to the committee in the last month. And so now we're up to 9 members. We have divided the community into 9 sectors, and each of us monitor our own individual area each month so that we can report on how did Yardneek do with the cutting of the grass or the blowing of the leaves, how did Brightview do with the application of the lime, how did Edge Environmental do in terms of taking care of algae blooms in the ponds, the SCMs. And so this team, each of us have a separate area that we manage. So you can see the team. We have Bill Fischel from the board, is both a member of the Landscape Committee and our liaison with the board. Gail Ditkoff, Dr. Ditkoff, manages our volunteer work group. She has been doing that now for about 6 months. They do some of the volunteer work, like cutting out some of the bamboo down here in the area. The bamboo is a very invasive species that we want to get in control. And so we have a nice team, and we're working very well together. I know there was a bit of controversy about a year ago, and we've pretty well put that to rest. We've got a great team, and we're working really well together. Okay, as far as area monitoring, we have 6 residential areas, so we divide the community up into 6 zones. You're in either 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. And then we also have what we call a perimeter. That's Andrews Chapel and Leesville Road, those stretches along that are fenced in that are our property. We have the Piedmont Hall grounds, and we have the basins, the ponds. So that's our 9 areas then. The property is currently managed by a company called Yardneek. Yardneek is a Raleigh-based company, but they are spread over about 4 states. They're a pretty good-sized company, maybe a $35, $40 million company, and we're their top customer. So we get good attention from them. And right now, our assessment is they're doing a pretty good job, but we're all ears. If you don't think they're doing a good job, let us know, because that's our job, is to make sure that Associate knows, and Associate then manages Yardneek and gives them the directions on what they need to know. The SEMs are managed by Edge Environmental, another local company. And then the line that we're having put down is put down by Brightview Corporation, which is the largest landscaping company in the world. They're about $2.5 billion company. Here's the way we break the community up. You can sort of see the dividing lines. Essentially, the odd numbers are on the right side of Del Webb Arbors Drive as you go up, and the even numbers, 2, 4, and 6, are on the left side. So you can pretty well pick out which area you're in. Now, these are the type of charts we use when we monitor. Typically, each of the 6 residential areas will evaluate 3 homes spread out in the area, hopefully not the same homes time after time. We want 3 different homes each month. And we give a pretty thorough evaluation of those 3 homes, any pocket parks or common areas in there, and the member fills out this form, and this form in its completed state goes to Associate for review with the Yardneek people so that they get feedback on how they're doing. And they've been getting, I'd say, B+ to A grades for the last 6 months or so. This young fellow they have running it, Landon Estes, is dedicated to us. He's our person, and his team toes the line for him, and we're getting what we need from him in the most part. And he's pretty responsive. Just go to caservices@yardneek.com if you need him to do something, or if you need him to attend to a problem, like maybe one of his guys clips a pop-up, and he'll replace them. He'll get that done in a hurry. So, I mean, you know, have confidence that he can do what we need. Now, as far as the ponds, the SCMs, that's the new name. They used to call them BMPs, which was a crazy name, Best Management Practices. SCM means Stormwater Control Measure. We have 11 of these ponds, and Edge Environmental, as I said earlier, manages them for us. They are required by county ordinance to manage the stormwater flow and control any of the water in the community that is running around naturally. We are taxed by the city and county of Durham, though, for those ponds. I think we pay about $1,000 per pond per year in taxes, and a total of about $60,000 a year to manage these and maintain them. So they're not cheap, but they're required. We don't have a choice on them. And if you see an algae bloom that one of us doesn't pick up on right away, let me know or let one of my team know, and we'll make sure it gets tended to, because we have the way to treat algae blooms and eliminate them very quickly. Now this is the SEM map. You can see all of the blue lights up, or blue spots up there. That's where all of the ponds are. So there's quite a few of them, 11 altogether.
Excuse me?
Yes?
Why does Durham tax the stormwater?
To make money.
But they have no responsibility for caring for them.
Oh, they come and they check us. They come and do an audit. And they will audit, I think it's every 60 days, they do an audit of all 11 of our ponds. So they cost them a little bit to do the audit, of course. But it's a tax, and it's one that is sort of for long term. If somebody has these ponds and don't maintain them, they'll use that revenue to eventually fix the problem, but then fine the people that haven't taken care of them. But, you know, it's like any other tax.
Karl,
Yeah.
what is your algae treatment? How do you do that?
We call it an algae bomb. It sounds bad, but it's basically a copper-based salt that will kill off algae very quickly, and it drops to the bottom and just settles out.
And what impact does that have on any kind of fish that may be there or the birds that lay there?
Good question. It's very innocuous to the flora and fauna other than the algae. It's very specific to the algae. And it's interesting because it had not been approved until about 4 years ago. They finally approved it for use in North Carolina, but they did a lot of testing before they approved it to make sure that it was safe for the aquatic creatures and the birds. And even if you know, a mouse or a groundhog or something like that were to drink the water, it won't hurt the animal.
Or like our dogs?
Or dogs, yeah. Now it should be innocuous for dogs as well. So quite non-toxic to anything except algae, fortunately.
Do we have fish in these ponds that deal with mosquitoes?
Not generally, no. We keep the mosquitoes in control by keeping the ponds aerated. That's why you see the aerators, the pumps that spray the water up and all that. That's not just for decorations, that is to aerate it, to keep air in there. And that helps keep the mosquitoes down.
The ponds that don't have the aeration.
They're talking about eventually having them in all of them. I don't know if we're there yet. I think we're like 8 of the 11, but it's coming. And as long as you have good movement too, you take care of the problems with the mosquitoes. You know, as long as the water's flowing. And so I think the ones that are more standing water, like the big one at Bloomsbury and Del Webb Arbors, that one's that's so much water, it sits there for a while. It needed the aeration. Some of the others, the water moves through pretty quickly. Now, the common areas, pocket parks, and benches. We have, as I said, the common areas are marked on the map, and I'll show you in a second, all in yellow. And they're the areas like along the edge of the streets that aren't household property, behind some of the houses, and it's a bit random where they are. Our builder did some interesting things with laying out common area versus residential property. And so you have to look at the map to know what is common area versus what is individual property. The pocket parks, we have 15 of those, and they're designed for our entertainment. And some groups of residents have actually adopted pocket parks and beautifying them. They've added flowers. The one pocket park on Horn Creek, a lady named Marion, I forget her last name, but she does a beautiful job deadheading the roses. It was probably one of the prettiest of the parks last year because of her work. She does some fertilizing, and we'll actually spend some money for fertilizer for people that want to tend to a pocket park in their neighborhood. So that's one thing to keep in mind. You can adopt a pocket park if you have one close to you that you'd like to make look even prettier.
Does that
go ahead.
submittal go to you for approval or go through ARC?
For pocket parks, it goes to us, to the Landscape Committee. And I'll get to the common area modification request forms, and that's what you would use. It used to be a combined form that we and ARC used the same form, but it was pretty specific to ARC. So I basically got a new form in that's just for common area modifications for the Landscape Committee to approve. And it's all three of these, new benches, common areas, and pocket parks it can be used for. And even the entrances. If somebody had an idea of how to beautify and make more attractive the entrances, like more flowers, for example, we'd be welcome to having the participation of the residents to do that. And then, yeah, this is the form, and that page I showed you, the Landscape Committee page, this form is on that page. So you can just go to groups and clubs, go down to Landscape Committee, and you'll find the forms. Okay, there, you see all the yellow up there. All of that is the common areas. You can see there's little tiny strips like this, big areas like this, and so forth, so on throughout the community. And so you need this map, which is right here on the table, to define what's a common area versus what's your homeowner property. So like street trees in common areas, the Landscape Committee's in charge of. Street trees for people's homes, you're in charge of.
What's the pink area there?
The pink area is Piedmont Hall.
Oh,
Yep. Okay, and there's 15 pocket parks marked on, oh, sorry, I went too fast. There's 15 pocket parks. You can just barely see them on here, unfortunately. They're little pink circles, like right there, and there, and the brand new one right here at the end of Rosedale was just, I'm sorry, down here at the end of Rosedale was just dedicated in memory of Gene Schmidt. We put in some landscaping, we put a plaque on the bench for Gene, and we think it was very well deserved. He'd done such a marvelous job in the community, and it was delightful for us to be able to lead that project, and they had the nice ceremony on Saturday. Okay, here's the form again. This is the common area modification request form, or it's good for pocket parks and the like, and it's right here. This button will give you that form. So if you have common area behind your home, you can request modifications to it that you would do. I mean, that's up to you. If you want to modify it, any kind of landscaping, you need to put this form through with your specifics of what you're proposing. And naturally, it's at homeowner expense, and you have to maintain it if you put it in. But we welcome it and find it delightful. And quite a few people have actually modified the common areas behind their homes. Now, in the natural areas, these are the treed and non-maintained areas. We're not even supposed to take down a dead tree in there unless it presents a threat, which we did, and I'll show you. We did some of that work last fall where we took a number of trees down. Otherwise, what happens in the natural areas, we let the trees fall and they go back to nature. We leave the leaves there, we leave, what's there, we leave there, and there should not be any dumping in common areas. Common areas are off ground for dumping. And you can see we do have some invasive species. We have both bamboo and kudzu in the neighborhood, and we encourage anybody that sees kudzu, cut it down, cut it out. And with the bamboo, we've got a couple of folks that are cutting the bamboo for us in the volunteer group, but that's a huge job, and there's 4 major stands of bamboo in the community that the forest ranger that came in and did our survey last year identified for us. And so we're attacking them as best we can, but it's a huge job.
where's the kudzu around here?
There's a couple, I've seen it in behind a couple of houses, not a whole lot, fortunately. We've been very fortunate, but up off of Calmia, I think I saw some, and I think down here off of the trail, there's a bit. We're very fortunate that it's not very pervasive. I mean, you can see what it can look like along the highways when you drive throughout the south. It's really nasty stuff. And there's several other invasive species. There's some kind of a jade vine with a yellow flower that's quite invasive. And that's why we really try to avoid any invasive species coming in here. And even things like they use up in the north, like crown vetch. We don't want crown vetch planted down here. Crown vetch is great for road divides and the like up in the north where they need something hardy. Down here, it would take over. It would grow like mad. So we do try to keep that out. And we follow the invasive species list very carefully. So when a plant is proposed, that's one of the things we do, is we make sure it's something that would be considered an invasive species. Okay, the greenways and bridges, that's the paved areas through the greenways are required by ordinance. That trail is part of what Durham expects the builder to put in. And so we're very fortunate to have a very nice network of trails around the property. We try to cut 6 feet on either side of that. That's part of your gardening's job. Every so often I catch them cheating and only doing 5 feet, and I give them a hard time. But they do a pretty nice job of it. And all 8 of the bridges have just been power washed and treated with sealant, because we want them to last a while. They're beautiful bridges, and we don't want them to decay or rot away. So we're trying to take good care of them. Here's the bridge map. They're in red up here. See them on here, here, here. No, I can't see them all right in there. But there's 8 of them all together. And they're very nice in connecting all of the parts of our greenway. Now, I told you about dangerous trees. We had 27 major large trees removed last fall by a company called Monster Tree. They brought in some real heavy equipment to take some of these trees. You can see the size of the logs that they took down. So we took out 27 trees that were either leaning over houses or leaning in such a way they could have damaged property like fencing and or could have been a safety hazard for people. But they were huge and they were ready to come down on their own pretty soon, so we got rid of those. And again, Monster Tree was managed by Associa. We identified the 20 trees, and then Associa went and had the contract bid out to several different companies. And this company, again, is another local company that did a very nice job for us. The tree and shrub replacement program that we run typically each fall, this past year, we replaced 537 shrubs and 81 trees. So that's quite a number of trees and shrubs, and yet that to 75 street trees that we had put in, and we put in almost 700 pieces of greenery, if you will, trees and shrubs in the past 6 months. And so this was a major project. We walked, the committee walked all 6 of the residential areas plus the common areas in the perimeter, identified trees and shrubs that either needed to be replaced or were missing or where there were more needed. And we listened to residential input. We put out a survey, asked people to respond to us if there were trees that they saw that needed attention, put that together to come up with this. Bid that out, that was about a $40,000 contract for that many trees and shrubs, which was a pretty good deal for that many. And Yardney won that bid, and they did a real good job. They had 1 left to go, 1 tree left, and they're waiting for it to be delivered. That's the only reason it's not in already. Now, watch for and don't move. You see the flags around? There's a lot of colored flags. What they are is they mark the new plants. We put them in initially to show where the plants were to go. Now they're there. We had them leave the flags there, so come this summer, we can see how they did. And if they didn't do right, we'll make them replace them because they do have a warranty on them. So be careful not to move any of the flags you see out there. Street trees was another issue we got involved in because the board asked the landscape committee if we could find a good vendor who could provide a good price if we were to get a contract for maybe 70, 75 trees which were needed that people had failed to replace when they were supposed to. Now, let me start with first off, the street trees are not required because of the board or our HOA. They're required because of Durham County ordinance. They are intended to replace some of the myriad of trees that were lost when we came in and just site cleared this whole area. So that's a county law that you have to have street trees every 40 feet along facing. So first off, we have to do that based on county law. The HOA merely enforces it because they're the governing body here, and they set the guidelines as far as what you can plant, because what we want is uniformity by street. So any given street will have either an oak, a maple, an elm, or it was cherries, but we're moving away from cherries. Cherries just are not doing well here. We're moving more to single stem crepe myrtles, which are quite beautiful. In fact, the ones that we've replaced recently, and I just had my 2 front cherries, which weren't dead, replaced when we did this, because it was such a good price. I mean, we were able to get trees for about $500 planted and decent size, 2-inch caliber, 8-foot tall trees, which was a nice price to have put in. But I did mine too, because these new Tuscarora crepe myrtles, single stems, they look like a tree. They don't look like a typical crepe myrtle with all its different stems coming up. And they're quite beautiful, about the same color flower as a cherry. So we're replacing the cherries gradually with that, because they're like weeds down here where the cherries just don't make it. It's too hot for the cherries. So in any event, Leaf and Limb was the company that won that contract. They're a local company, very strong supporter of the Arboretum down here, the Ralston Arboretum, and great people to work with, and they did the 75 trees for us. Yes?
I have to say, we had our street tree replaced by them. Absolutely. I've been a gardener all my life, and my mother had an interior landscape design business, and I have never seen a company do as meticulous a job of the planting, the preparation of the tree that had been pot bound, and they were happy to allow me to stand there and ask questions, and they are my go-to people from now on.
Yeah, I agree. I've had a lot of interaction with them getting this set up, and even attended one of their crepe myrtle pruning classes down at the Arboretum, taught by one of their people, and they are just a world-class company, even though they're a small local company run by an NC State grad, I guess he is, and really a sharp guy, and very dedicated to doing good landscaping. So, yeah, I can't speak highly enough of them. I'm glad to hear your input. Yes?
Carl, what's his name, your contact that we will
Pat,
Patrick Munley.
pardon?
Patrick Munley.
Yeah, Patrick Munley, right, it just lost it for a second. Patrick Munley at Leaf and Limb, but there's a team of them. They have about 6 treologists, or treecologists, I think they call themselves. And very talented people, very dedicated people. And I know the 2 young kids that replaced the trees in my front yard are really talented and knew what they were doing. And both of them college degreed, and here they are planting the trees. I mean, out there digging a hole in the ground, and that's their careers. But they're doing something they really love to do. So, yeah, we had a great program. This went very smoothly. I think the vast majority of missing street trees in the neighborhood have now been replaced. So we're feeling good about the looks of the neighborhood. Okay, here are the street trees that you're allowed to have. As you can see, we have the four genuses down the side here, and then we have the species that are permitted for each genus along there. You can't have any maple or any oak. You have to pick from these lists. But in that way, we get uniformity along each of the streets, and it really does help to maintain the beauty of the community. And we changed this to start putting in this single trunk crepe myrtle as an alternative to cherries, because the cherries throughout the neighborhood have suffered pretty badly. Okay, this was a cover page of a report, and you can read the report on our LC homepage, done by the Department of Agriculture's Forest Ranger based here in Durham. And we asked him in the committee, before I joined the committee, to be fair, they asked him in to evaluate our plants, our soil, to understand better why some of the plants weren't doing well, why some of the street trees weren't doing well, and the like. And he put together a very comprehensive report that concluded three things. First thing is, we had way too much mulch. We are averaging about 6 inches of mulch across the community. Now, there are places that it's bare too. I mean, it's not everywhere, but a lot too much mulch. That was very harmful to the trees. Too many trees had mulch built up around their trunks. It was really hampering their growth. The second thing was the soil was frighteningly acid. pH 3.5. Now, I don't know if you know the scale, but 7 is neutral, and each step you take down is a 10-fold change. So here we are, 3,500 units lower in pH than what is neutral. And Bermuda grass should be about 6.5. So we needed to go 3 units of pH up to improve it. And lime is sort of like ground up chalk or ground up seashells. So it's a pretty innocuous material, but it'll raise the pH slowly. And so he recommended that we put down something like 80 to 120 pounds per 1,000 square feet, which is a lot of lime. And he said do it in small quantities. And so what we've started is a program. We're putting down 15 pounds per 1,000 square feet across all of the turf. Excuse me. And we've done 2 of those treatments so far. And next step is we're going to measure soil pH again. Because the pH actually ranged from about 3.5 to 5.0. So from lemon juice to vinegar type range. Yep.
Karl, when did they do these treatments? Because I know that I looked for them and I wasn't sure in what type of consistency the lime was going to be in. Because I know where I used to live, we used to put lime on our soil because the adobe brick soil that we have here is horrible.
Right.
So, I mean, I never really did see anything that I thought was lime go down on my property, but I could be wrong.
It's like a light brown powder is what they put down.
It's a powder and
It's a
not a
powder.
pellet.
This is sort of a powder what they're using. I think it might be agglomerated something like a pellet, but it's mostly a powder so that it can get dissolved more rapidly and be drawn down into it.
I never, and I didn't see any flags go up or anything that indicated that it had been done. So that was my question to Landon, and he was kind enough to tell me it was done twice.
Mhm.
But I never saw it, so I just wondered.
Well, we try to announce it, and it takes about a week when they do to do the whole neighborhood. So I can't pinpoint exactly what day they'd be at any given property, but over the course of a week, they put down the lime across beds and across turf throughout, and including the common areas. We wanted those treated as well. And, kind of keep an eye out for the next announcement. We won't do another treatment, though, until we have the results of this. No, it'll be probably in April. Yeah, because what we're going to do is we're going to do, I think in the next week, we're going to do the soil sampling. They're going to come around and sample about 18 spots around the community. They're going to do geopositioning where they'll use their GPS to spot exactly where they take the sample so that we can go back there again after each treatment and do the test. But just watch for the announcement of when it's coming, and it'll be over a week. And I can give you the name of the guy that's the head from Brightview for this area. And Brightview is doing it. I think they've hired Greenscape to actually apply it, but they're the ones that are managing it. Yes?
They were at Bloomsbury today.
Is that Brightview? Well, see, some people hire Brightview to do their property
No,
too.
we had to hire them.
Okay. Well, there's different treatments that come in different times of the year. This may be fertilizer that you're seeing. Yeah, they were doing spray fertilizer, so that could be what it is right now. But yeah, Brightview is very good. They handle, for example, they handle Apple and Amazon properties all across the country. And they're going to have the new Apple facility here that's going to be bigger than the Cupertino facility in California. So, I mean, Brightview has the business, and they're fighting hard to get it away from Yardney, but Yardney has come in very price competitive. So we're benefiting from the competition right now. Sure. Okay, but anyway, take a look at this. So that's two of the findings, that the soil was low pH and that the mulch was too thick. So we're also going to take a mulch holiday next year, or this year. We're going to hold off on mulch to let it degrade the way it's supposed to degrade and get us down to a more appropriate level of mulch around the trees and in the beds. The third finding that they had, they found that all of the bamboo was out, and that was the other thing. They suggested strongly that we do everything we can to control that. So we're working on that as well as we can. We're going to try to do it with volunteers, but if it gets beyond what the volunteers can do, we may need to hire some professional help to do the bamboo. So this is, well, here's all of what I just said right there. He did a very nice job, a beautiful report that was brought in by the committee. More information, much of what I just told you right here. And so the resampling is going on this month. And the mulch holiday. And as I said earlier, that mulch is $170,000 a year for our community. We could do up to 6 lime treatments of the quantity we're talking for that much money. So, I mean, we can put down a good bit of mulch. And we believe that'll be more than enough lime to offset the mulch and the pH issues. Now, the invasive species, as I said, there's 4 substantial growths of bamboo in the community. They're cutting it back. There's a couple of small patches of kudzu. And what we're really encouraging is residents that spot the kudzu. And we'll get some information out on what kudzu looks like. Better pictures than I had earlier, so that people can cut it themselves. I mean, the big thing there is just cut it down. Okay, a lot of people have asked about electrically powered equipment. Well, we are working very diligently because both Yardney and Brightview have been evaluating electrically powered equipment. And we're exploring the options to move to it. In fact, we have a presentation scheduled at our meeting on Tuesday to discuss what Yardney has found. And we've also talked to Brightview about what they've found. So far, the issues that we're studying are the cost. What's the real cost and the capital and operating parameters of it? What's the practicality today? You know, how good is the equipment today versus the gasoline-powered equipment that they're using? What are the equipment performance comparisons? This is what we want to get quantified. Battery life and charging. The battery will last about 3 hours when they're using it like on a mower or on a leaf blower. How many batteries do you have to be able to do 10 million square feet? And where do you charge them? How do you charge that many batteries? I mean, these are logistics that need to be worked through. It's not as simple roll over and do it because it's right. And I mean, I would love to do it. I mean, I have solar on my house. I drive a hybrid car. I mean, I would do anything to get us moving toward this, but we've got to get it practical because it's going to be expensive. The infrastructure for that big of a charging station is not going to be cheap. And the timing to do it, we'll worry about the timing. I mean, what we'd like is as soon as possible, but we're looking very carefully at it. So it's not something that's falling on deaf ears. The entire committee is anxious to pursue it. We're going to be driven by the numbers, though, right now. I mean, we don't want to do something that's going to cost a lot of money, raise our HOA fees. I don't think that we would survive on the committee if we start raising HOA fees too much. I know there may be some give on it, but you know, everything in its time. Now, somebody said Japanese beetles were an issue. Well, they certainly are. They come every June, early July, and they've been arriving since the early 1900s, thanks to a shipment of something from Japan back in that era. And they eat and skeletonize the leaves of more than 350 species of plants here in North Carolina. And the larvae also eat the roots on all of our grass. So how do you control it? Well, one way is to hand pick them. I remember doing that with my grandpa back in Pennsylvania, picking them off the roses, and as a kid, dumping them into a little can of water. It wasn't real successful. Then I see a lot of people using the bait traps, where you put the traps out with the pheromone attractants, and that works to a sense, but it also attracts the beetles from everywhere else to your yard. So you have to question, do you really want to be attracting them to your yard? The next one is insecticide, and that works. There's a couple of them. The Acelepryn G from Washington State Department of Agriculture is claimed to be earth-friendly. The next one, the imidacloprid, is for non-flowering plants. It works pretty well, but they have to eat the leaf to be able to ingest that, so they're going to do some harm to the plant, and also do harm to bees. The 7 is a good insecticide, but still you have to worry about the impact on other species, on the bees, for example. Same with the orthine. So you have to worry about the insects that are out there, other good insects, rather than just the Japanese beetles. And I'll tell you the last one I find interesting, and I've done this on 4 or 5 houses now. I put milky spore down as soon as I move in. And I had a very light load of beetles last year because I had my milky spore for at least 3 years, and it's beginning to take place. And what it is, it's a bacillus, a bacteria that eats or it goes into the larva, and it kills the larva underground. And then with each larva that dies, it generates a whole lot more of the bacillus that spreads, and eventually it covers your whole yard. The way you apply it is a teaspoon every 3 feet each direction. And it's real easy to apply. Probably should wear a mask, which we all know how to do these days. But it goes down easily, and if you get enough people doing it, you start to really have some good control. And the nice thing is mine is now spreading even beyond my yard, because this stuff doesn't stop just within your own property. It just goes where it wants to go. But like I said, most of the Japanese beetles I had came from elsewhere, and they found me, but they had to come and look for me, because I'm not growing any on my property, which is what I like. So I recommend that as a good but slow process. It takes a couple of years for it to really take full hold, but it works, and I swear by it. So those are my thoughts for you. None of them are great. In one way or the other, you can find reasons to not like any of them, but the milky spore seems to me to be the one that's both effective, safe, and does the job. Now, you gotta protect the bees. That's my son and my grandson over in Chapel Hill with their beehives. So I have to throw that picture in. The bees are very sensitive to a lot of the insecticides that are out there. We had that severe issue with colony collapse disease that killed off almost half of all the bees in the world that I got into because of the beeswax that's used in beauty care products, of all things. So I met with beeswax producers and tried to learn about it, and that was really driven by a couple of insecticides that got out of control and were used too much, killed off a lot of bees as a result, but they blamed it on a disease and they pointed fingers everywhere else, but it was a couple of insecticides that did it. So I have to help my son protect his bees. Okay, landscape lighting. Another thing we get our fingers into is the landscape lighting. When Pulte built this place, they put some pretty nice landscape lighting in. Good quality, it was working, and then everybody forgot about it. So we have this nice system outside that until recently nobody even looked at. And what I realized is the lights on the trees out here, most of them were pointing at the ground, or down, or out, or wherever, not at the trees. They were coming on at noon and going off at 6. Sounds like good timing for landscape lighting, right? Nobody worried about the timers when you have a power outage, it throws the timers off. So what we're trying to do is get them fixed and also get rid of the incandescent lights and go to LEDs. We've almost not finished the LED conversion now. I mean, the lights at the entrances are very bright. They were incandescent. They were eating tons of energy. They were halogens. They really ate a lot of energy. They've all been recently switched in the last month, literally, to LEDs. We've driven that. Another thing that worries me is there's no lighting on the back steps out here or on the side steps of Piedmont Hall. Could be very dangerous at night on those steps. And we realize they need to be done for safety reasons, and we've been pushing the board to get that lighting added. And lastly, this is a beautiful building. If you look at that building in the daylight, it's a beautiful building. At night, you can't see anything. What if we put a little bit of wash lighting along it? We would really improve the looks of this place in the evenings. And so we're just throwing that out as an idea. Probably means spending a little bit of money, but I think it's probably affordable. And so we're pushing for some wash lighting on the building as well. Okay, now, what do you do? I told you before, we don't want to dispose anything into the natural areas. Garden waste should not be dumped into either the common or natural areas. Composting, though, is an option. You can do composting on your property. And Durham even has a page on composting on their website, on the Durham Waste Management website. And lastly, you can take your lawn and garden waste to the Durham Yard Waste Facility at 2115 East Club Boulevard for $5 for up to a minivan load. So I mean, you're talking, they'll take a big load for $5. And so I recommend, if you have waste, send it to the proper place. Yes, ma'am?
Barbara Weber on Turnstone has sent out an email about a service, and I compost in our own backyards in a device, but she was talking about one where they will provide you with a container and periodically pick it up.
That's interesting.
So,
It's a
Large
brown
brown container, regular pickups.
Okay? And how you can help. Join our volunteer work group. We need all skill levels, all strength levels, all capabilities. We need people to deadhead flowers. We need people to chop down trees and everything in between. And so if you can do anything from deadheading roses to chopping down trees, we'd love to have you on the team. You can adopt a pocket park. The pocket parks are beautiful, but they can be even nicer, and especially if they're tended to closely by somebody who cares and right in the immediate vicinity. Or you could even adopt an entrance. As a club, you could adopt one of the entrances and beautify it. More of the perennials, for example. I mean, we do some. We pay for some perennials to go in, and they do a nice job with what they have, but we do have a finite limit on what we can afford. But if you want to help, there's 2 entrances that could use attention. And then finally, give us the feedback and observations. If you see something that isn't right about the landscaping, anything that's green we consider ours, let us know about it. And we'll try to respond, and try to respond quickly. We've got a great team, and we're ready to stand up and help. So finally, the key contacts are Landon Estes. He's the CA on-site manager at CA Services at yardneat.com. James Pierce here at Associa is the person who is responsible for managing the work that they do. You can contact me, or you can contact Philip Smith, who's the general manager and James's boss here. Now, any questions? This is, by the way, is one of the adopted pocket parks. And I'm telling you, the roses were beautiful. Yes?
I have a common area in my backyard, Delaware Gardens, and I have 4 holly trees, holly bushes, that look very sick for 5 years. Do they fertilize much
Not much.
at all, that whole area?
That whole area gets a little bit. I mean, fertilizing is something that we don't do a lot of because some people don't want fertilizer added. So it's controversial, it's a two-edged sword. Some people already are doing their own. And that goes for common areas as well as your own. You're welcome to fertilize. I mean, a little bit of even 10-10-10 might help.
I do, leave from there.
Yeah,
Also, there was irrigation back there for years.
no, it doesn't work.
So what happens to all the tubing?
We're gradually getting that up. The volunteer group is, in fact, Gail has really gone after it. She's been taking that on as a personal vendetta to get up the tubing, because some of the tubing is actually choking some of the trees now.
It's all across the top now.
Yeah, so she's trying to get it, and if you see it, cut it. The only thing don't cut is around Piedmont Hall. The irrigation around Piedmont Hall works, but you get out into the other areas along Del Webb Arbors and that way.
Although, if Young League is in charge of that, shouldn't they be doing that work?
No, that's not their job. No, getting rid of the hoses is not something we pay them to do. I mean, we could, but it'd be extra money. So that's why we're having the volunteers do it. But I encourage you, if you see up around the dog parks, the playground, if you see any hosing out there from the old irrigation, you might as well pull it out, because it doesn't work. It's gone. They put really cheap stuff up there to just get it growing the first year or two, and then it began to sprout leaks all over. The good irrigation, though, is around Piedmont Hall, and it is still working, so don't, now we managed to cut a pipe here, but I know.